Hello everyone, welcome to this channel, Crime Africa and more. Please support us by subscribing to this channel where we casually discuss true crime in Africa and beyond. Today we are starting off by diving into one of the most infamous and terrifying crime stories to ever come out of Nigeria. This is the story of Lawrence Anini, also known as the Law. A man who struck fear into the hearts of millions of Nigerians in the 1980s. So we're going back in time a little bit there. So this man, Lawrence Anini, was ruthless, intelligent and cunning. Anini orchestrated one of the bloodiest and most notorious crime sprees in Nigerian history. His story is one of power, corruption and terror. He is known to have killed 9 police officers, some say 11, and at least 9 civilians, and injured many more. He was a very nasty man. Although he confined his atrocities to Bendor State, which is present-day Edo and Delta states, and surrounding areas, Anini was a threat to Nigeria's national security and an embarrassment to the Nigerian police force and the military government at that time, spearheading a reign of terror that reached unimaginable levels which Nigerians had never seen before and likely to ever see again. In the 4 months between August and December 1986, it was terrible. Anini and his gang murdered at will, robbed and harried and kidnapped. And he dared the top echelon of the police force by brutally attacking the convoy of a police commissioner and an assistant inspector general of police of the state. He was so elusive, so that a popular newspaper at the time, The Guardian Nigeria, asked the question that was on everyone's mind: will they ever find Anini the Law? So settle in as we explore the rise and fall of Lawrence Anini, the man who defied the law and ruled the streets of Benin City in the mid-80s. My name is Yao Bantu and I'm your host for this channel, Background and Early Life. Before Lawrence Anini became the monster known as the Law who terrorized Benin City, let me just point out that there is also a country called Benin. I think they're neighbors or not far from Nigeria, but this is the city in Nigeria, formerly Bendor State, now Edo and Delta states. Just to make that distinction. So the man was born Lawrence Nomayagobon Anini in 1960 in Orago village. His mother was Akugwehi Oga Domangibe, and she had 3 children, of which he was the second child and only son. His birth coincided with a jubilant country filled with optimism and hope as Nigeria became a sovereign state under the British monarchy in 1960. I believe there were like 3 countries at that time. Did they become the 3rd or the 4th country in the world to be a sovereign state under the British monarchy? So obviously they said, okay, you are free, but the Queen is still your head of state. There was jubilation. People were happy, but not completely happy because they became a republic. 3 years later, they said, no, we don't want the Queen to be our head of state. We want one of our own, a president, to be the head of state of our country. And therefore, they became completely independent in 1963. So Anini being born in 1960 and, early 1960s, those were very exciting times, I would imagine, in Nigeria and even across the whole of Africa, because most African countries were gaining independence from colonialism at that time. So as the country emerged from colonialism, and like so many Nigerians at that time, Anini had a humble start. The details of his childhood are somewhat murky, but what's clear is that he grew up in an environment where the poverty was rampant and opportunities were limited. You know what? This happens a lot. Even in Africa today, there's so many people that grew up in these circumstances. We did grow up in those circumstances, isn't it? You don't feel the poverty at that time because everyone else is like you. So it's not like you go around and feel like you're poor. You only learn about your poverty as you get older, isn't it? When actually maybe the world and the environment tells you that you're poor and you see some people from the suburbs and whatever. His father died in 1980, and according to some sources, his father had another family, so Anini was mostly left to fend for himself. He would later accuse the police of killing his father and brother. Maybe this could explain his hate for the police, but there is no evidence that the police killed his father or his brother. Remember that his mother had 3 children. He was the only boy. So then, if he had a brother, it must have been a stepbrother from the other family. And obviously, there are no records that his father was actually killed by the police. Anini left his village in his teenage years for Benin City to fulfill his burning desire of driving a taxi. Anini had left primary school early. He did not go far at all. I believe he went around grade 4 or 5, and that was it. The reasons are that he may have been too poor to proceed with school, opting to pursue other income-generating activities to make ends meet and assist the family. Again, that is not unusual for that time. And even in some areas this time around, you just going to school sometimes does not make sense when you just can't afford anything. A young Anini was a determined person. He adapted to life in the city quickly, and he soon found his way to the wheel of a taxi, his dream. He learned how to drive and soon started driving a taxi in the city as his job. It's not clear when he actually got the license. That's a bit mucky there. In Africa sometimes, I don't know now, maybe things are digitalized, but before, you could pretty much buy a license, isn't it? Get a license, pretty much buy any document. But I think it's becoming harder now with this digitization and everything. But it doesn't say at what age he actually got the license. You'd think that you'd have to be around 18. I don't know whether he actually got the license or he just learned how to drive. Despite being very young, he was a natural leader, street smart and fearless. At the motor park, his word was law. He was one of those individuals people naturally gravitated to, and he became popular for resolving motor park crises, gaining his nickname, the Law. All right, so that's where he got his name from resolving motor park crises. All right, so it's not because he was a notorious murderer. I'm not so sure whether he was a physically imposing tall dude who looked authoritative, but from the pictures that I saw, he seemed to be of average build and height. Sometimes, as you know, physical attributes play a role with leadership. Sometimes, but not always. But there was obviously something about him. With a few legitimate ways to make a living, Anini was surrounded by many young men in Benin City who found themselves drawn to crime, and it wasn't long before Anini found himself following that path. They say birds of the same feathers fly together. At first, he was involved in petty crime, starting off as a pickpocket. But as he was a good driver, he was soon recruited to channel his driving skills into crime, becoming the official driver for Benin bandits. He's moving up the world. He was essentially watching and learning from the bandits. He saw potential for a better life through crime. The lure of more substantial gains quickly drew him into a world of organized crime. Anini soon realized that petty theft and driving around with small-time bandits wouldn't get him very far, and he set his sights on something bigger, armed robbery. So you're obviously moving up the world, but that is why maybe they said that he was a very smart guy, coming from his background, you want to be a taxi driver, and then you join organized crime as a driver, and then you actually in an organized structure rather than just being a pickpocket and just be happy about that. So it shows he had something about him, something between those years. Forming a gang. Anini was different from his peers. He wasn't easily satisfied with petty crime. He wanted more than just survival. He wanted power. By the time he was in his 20s, he had built a reputation as a fierce and ruthless criminal, and he began recruiting like-minded individuals. So now he's going for his gang. This marked the beginning of his reign as the leader of a formidable gang. Anini's gang wasn't just any group of thugs. They were highly organized and disciplined, each member loyal and ready to follow him into danger. Among his closest allies was a man named Mandi Osnubi, who would become Anini's right-hand man and the key player in the gang's bloody campaign. So the group specialized in carjacking and bank robbery. It is kind of impressive for that time, isn't it? To think, let us specialize in something. As I say, a jack of all trades, master of none. So he looked at the specialization. In medicine, people specialize in surgery, family medicine, emergency medicines. So he was like, let's specialize in something and become experts at it. The time of Anini's gang activities is especially peculiar. There were coup d'etats in the country at the time in Nigeria. General Muhammad Buhari was the military ruler after he had overthrown a civilian government in 1983 in a coup d'etat. So General Buhari later on became the president, didn't he? In 1985, General Ibrahim Babangida overthrew his military arch-rival General Buhari to become the head of state till his resignation in 1993. Babangida was a very popular guy, wasn't he? I don't know whether he was bad or good, but you could hear a lot about Babangida. And then Buhari recently was the president of Nigeria as a civilian. He came back to become the president. That's so unusual. I think he was president of Nigeria from about 2015 to 2023. That's 2 terms of office. So for Anini to form a vicious gang under a military government was a brave and bold move. Together with Mande Osnubu, his right-hand man, and other loyal members, Anini's gang began orchestrating robberies with a level of coordination and planning rarely seen at the time. Their strategy was precise and their attacks were brutal. They robbed banks, attacked government vehicles, and ambushed anyone they believed had significant amounts of cash. But what really set Anini's gang apart was their utter disregard for the law. While many criminals might flee when faced with the police, Anini and his gang weren't afraid to go head-to-head with law enforcement officers. That is crazy, because in Africa, especially around that time, you've got a military government. You ought to be scared of the police. You ought to be scared of the military. Law enforcement is not like the Western sort of enforcement. You just don't do it because, it's more like they shoot first and then they ask questions later. They deal with you thoroughly. They beat you up and all that. I'm just saying that's what happens. Or you are possibly assumed guilty until you're proven innocent. The start of a reign of terror. By the mid-1980s, Anini and his gang had the experience and had been at it for a few years. It was time to scale up. They became bolder. Their operations became more frequent and the violence they inflicted escalated. They struck during the day and at night, terrorizing Benin City and other parts of Nigeria. Banks, markets, and even police stations were not safe from their wrath. The name Anini became synonymous with fear, and rumors of his violent exploits spread like wildfire. Some even believed he had supernatural powers, as he always seemed to escape from the police, even when they thought they had him cornered. Now, with money came the flamboyant lifestyle. Anini was a lover of nice clothes and a chain smoker. He particularly enjoyed wearing impeccably tailored suits. He was a spender and he loved the ladies. And of course, the ladies loved him. He had the reputation, he had the money, and local people praised him. He was a people's person. On nights out, he indulged in drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana. He was the main man with the money. And some ladies, that would do it for them. Have you seen all these like notorious murderers, they actually get married, they get fun males and all those kind of stuff. So it's not unusual, isn't it? People are into what they are into. Crazy. The most brutal months. So it seems 1986 was extremely busy as Anini the Law and his gang unleashed a 4-month reign of terror between August and December in 1986. The likes Benin City has never seen before and is unlikely to be repeated. Let us look at some of the robberies which we have found. In August of 1986, the Anini gang struck at First Bank, Sabongida Ora, where they carted away about $1,000. This was small change for the scale of robbery. Even in 1986, a small change. But although the amount stolen was seen as little, they left the scene with a trail of blood and destruction, completely unproportional to the amount of money they stole. There were injuries and deaths in the aftermath. Maybe, I don't know, it was out of frustration for getting away with so little money. On September 6, the following month, the Anini gang snatched a Peugeot 504 car from Albert Otowe. This man was a driver of an Assistant Inspector General of Police. Let that sink in. The Inspector General of Police at that time was Christopher Omebeni. In snatching the car, they killed the driver, that is Mr. Albert Otowe, and they went to hide his corpse somewhere else. It was not until 3 months later that the skeleton of the driver was spotted 16 kilometers away from Benin along the Benin-Agbo Highway. Now, the fact that he killed the driver of the Assistant General of Police is so scary, isn't it? And the country would have been terrified. This should have been the warning for the police to kick their, into gear, but it seems they just did not. A day after this attack, September 7th, that was 6th and now September 7th, Anini, operating a Passat car believed to have been stolen, went and car hijacked another Peugeot 504 car near the former Fedeco office in Benin. So it seems like he loved his Peugeot cars. So imagine you steal 2 Peugeot cars in 2 days in a row. I mean, how do you hide these? On September 29th, the same month, Anini's gang ambushed and killed a police officer in broad daylight. This act sent shockwaves through the country. No criminal had ever dared to be so brazen in challenging the authorities. Over the next few weeks, Anini's gang went on rampage, targeting and killing police officers and civilians alike. Next, Anini's men killed 2 policemen in Ohiwono. It is said that they were trying to arrest him when they had set up, the boom gate while conducting traffic stops. Still in that month, 3 different robbery attacks, all pointing to Anini's involvement, took place. They included the murder of Frank Onarumi, a former employee of the Nigerian Observer newspapers, the killing of Mrs. Remi Sobanjo, a chartered accountant, and the stealing of the Mercedes-Benz car in Benin of the Ogeri monarchy, the Ovoi. Man, this guy, he is police officers, monarchy, and everyone. Yeah. That's just crazy, the amount of criminal activity in such a short period of time. Wait, it hasn't finished. How terrified were the people in this month of September? Before September 1986 drew to a close, Anini, now an elusive dread, struck at a gas station along Wire Road, Benin, where he stole a substantial part of the day's sales. He shot at the station's attendant and gleefully started spraying the money along the road for people to pick as Anini and his gang drove away from the scene of the crime. So now he's becoming popular, like he's this mythical figure. Now he's spraying money as he's running away from the scene of the crime. They should make a movie about this guy. So the height of Anini's exploits, however, took place on October the 1st, 1986, Independence Day, when the state's commissioner of police, Kasma Igobokwe, was ambushed by the Anini gang in Benin, followed by a hail of bullets. The police boss survived the attack with serious injuries. Can you believe that? They actually attacked now the commissioner of police of that state. Apparently, earlier that day, on the 1st of October, Anini and his gang gunned down a policeman within the city. Man, who is this guy? On October 21st of the same year, the Anini gang terminated the life of a Benin-based medical doctor, Aoa Imojevi. They gunned him down along Textile Mill Road in Benin. And on the same day, on October 21st, 1986, after stealing Naira 46,000 from Agbo branch of the African Continental Bank, Anini drove into a nearby market and again tossed part of his loot from his getaway car to passers-by. Men and women attending the market must have thought Santa Claus, or Father Christmas as we say in Africa, came in early. Oh man, this is devastating. I mean, he just killed a medical doctor in the morning, and then in the same afternoon he goes and robs a bank and then tosses the money back to people. I just can't believe it. This action of spraying money, which he reportedly replicated numerous times, earned him the moniker Robin Hood, after a British folklore character who robbed the rich and shared proceeds with the poor. Actually, there are many famous gangsters who have done this in the past, isn't it? That's why some people won't give any information about this gang because they're very popular. They tend to be seen somehow as working against the establishment and fighting for the people. I don't know about that. I mean, with all this killing of police officers and people, I mean, you can't really say that, isn't it? Though they're giving you money, when people are so desperate, it becomes really dangerous, isn't it? The police were helpless, and Anini knew it. His confidence grew, and he began leaving mocking notes at the scenes of his crimes, taunting the police and daring them to catch him. Some accounts state that he was even giving notice to banks that he would come around and rob them to make sure that they had enough money for him and his gang. And sure enough, he would turn up as promised. Oh my God. I just can't believe what I'm reading. These acts of defiance only fueled his reputation as the law, a man who ruled the streets and answered to no one. For many, it seemed as if Anini was untouchable. Simply untouchable, wasn't it? Manhunt and public outcry. At the conclusion of a meeting of the Armed Forces Ruling Council in October 1986, General Babangida, the coup d'etat leader, famously turned to the Inspector General of Police, Itim Inyangi, and asked him, "My friend, where is Anini?" This is a very famous interaction. Worried by the public perception at the time, the military president at the time, General Babangida, ordered a massive manhunt for Anini and his gang. You'd have to, because if you're a military government and this is happening under military rule, so it is undermining the whole idea of a military government. The government responded by launching one of the largest manhunts in Nigeria's history. The police thus went after him and his gang. They combed every part of Bendo State where they were reportedly operating and living. The whole nation was gripped with fear of the robbers and their daredevil exploits. Though it was mostly in Bendo State, but everyone was afraid. Hundreds of officers were deployed, roadblocks were set up, and special units were assigned to capture Anini. The pressure on the police was immense, you think? Every day that Anini remained free was a blow to their reputation, and the media covered every step of the manhunt closely. But despite their efforts, Anini remained elusive. He knew the streets of Benin City better than anyone else, and his network of allies and informants kept him one step ahead of the police. As the weeks turned into months, the public grew restless. People now began to question the integrity of the police force. Like, look, you've got the army, you've got the police, you've got everyone hunting. Why can't you catch this guy? It just does not make any sense. People learned that the gang had the support of high-ranking police officers who were willing to look the other way in exchange for a cut of the loot. This corruption within the police force made it even harder to stop Anini. Capture and trial. Oh yeah, so they actually captured him. After months of relentless searching and immense pressure from the public, the police finally caught a break. In December 1986, following a tip-off, they managed to track down Lawrence Anini. On December 3rd, 1986, a police superintendent, Kayoda Onarero, caught Anini at number 26 Oyemwonsa Street, opposite Iguadaro Primary School in Benin City, in the company of 6 women. Not 1, but 6. Remember, he was a ladies' man. 6 is a lot, but you know what? He was living a fast life, so we're not surprised by that. Acting on a tip-off from the locals, the policemen went straight to the house where Anini was hiding. Unareroro led a crack 10-man team to the house, knocked on the door of the room, and Anini himself, in underpants, opened the door. So the police officer asked, "Where is Anini?" Dazed as he was caught off guard and having no escape route, Anini all the same tried to be smart and evade capture. He said, "Oh, Anini is under the bed in the inner room." As he said it, he made some moves to walk past Onyarero and his team. In the process, he shoved and head-butted the police officer. But this was too late. He was cornered and there was no way he was going to escape. Onaruru, the lead officer, reached for his gun, stepped hard on Anini's right toes and shot at his left ankle. Finally, Anini surged forward, but the policeman took hold of him and put him in a sitting position. They then pumped more bullets into his leg and almost severed the ankle from his entire leg. Already anguished by the excruciating pains, the police asked him, "Are you Anini?" And he replied, "My brother, I want to deceive you. I want to tell you a lie. I am Anini." He was from there taken to the police command headquarters where the state's police commissioner, Pari Osayande, was waiting. That should be the hospital first, isn't it? They almost blown his leg off. So I'm sure probably you want him alive. So you want to take him to the hospital first and then ask him a few questions after. While in the police custody, Anini, who had poor command of English, could only communicate in Pidgin, made a whole lot of revelations. He disclosed, for instance, that Osnobo, who had been arrested earlier, was his deputy, saying that Osnobo actually shot and wounded the former police boss of the state, Agbuso. Anini, who was shot in the leg, was transferred to a military hospital and had one of his legs amputated. So he was ratting on his people, you know what, yes, you are this, that, until the law catches up with you, and then you become then you start ratting out everyone, you know. So when Anini's hideout was searched, police recovered assorted charms, including the one he usually wore around his waist during operations. So he actually was practicing juju. Are you surprised by that? I'm not surprised. It was instructive that after Anini was captured and disposed of his charms, the man who terrorized a whole state and who was supposed to be fearless suddenly became remorseful, making confessions. I know. This was against public expectation of a daredevil hoodlum who would remain defiant to the very end. Nah, he did not. He did not. It seems it's now every man for himself. The bravado is gone. Shortly after the arrest of Anini and company, the daredevil robbers began to reveal the roles played by key police officers and men in the aiding and abetting of criminals in Bendel State and the entire country. Anini particularly revealed that Iyamu, who was the most senior police officer shooting the robbers, would reveal police secrets to them and then give them logistical support such as arms to carry out robbery operations. Yikes, oh my goodness. Looks like the police were fully involved with this guy. He further revealed that Iyamu, after each operation, would join them in sharing the loot. It was further exposed how Iyamu planned to kill Christopher Omabeni, an assistant inspector general of police in charge of intelligence and investigation. But Iyamu was later to be disappointed as the assailants dispatched, to eliminate Omabeni were only able to kill his driver Otuwe, a sergeant. Iyamu, whom the robbers fondly referred to as Baba, reportedly had choice buildings in Benin City, proof of how he invested the loot he obtained from men of the underworld. That's a very, very sad ending to the story. Now we see how he was able to get away with murder in broad daylight. The police were in it. Well, not the whole police department, but top policemen were involved, actually instructing them on who to kill next. Maybe, who knows, maybe if you want a position in the police force, you just probably go to them and tell them to get rid of him so you can get into that post. Bad, bad, bad. Due to the amputation of his leg, Anini was confined to a wheelchair throughout his trial. Iyamu, on his part, the police officer, denied ever knowing and collaborating with Anini. But Anini, the law, furiously retorted, "You are a shameless liar." Anini had accused him before Justice James Omo Agege in the High Court of Justice in Benin City. Of the 10 police officers Anini implicated, 5 were convicted. The robbery suspects, including Iyamu, were sentenced to death. So the robbery suspects, including Iyamu, who was the senior police officer, were all sentenced to death. But in his passing his judgment, Justice Omo Agege remarked, "Anini will forever be remembered in the history of crime in this country, but it would be of unblessed memory. Few people, if ever, would give the name to their children." Final days and execution. In March 1987, Lawrence Anini and several members of his gang faced the consequences of their actions. So they were caught in December 1986, and March, barely 3 months later, they were facing firing squad. He had killed 11 police officers and 9 civilians, according to the records at the time. There is some inconsistency with the numbers due to poor record keeping. A grim, but in the eyes of many, necessary end to one of the bloodiest chapters in Nigeria's criminal history. Thousands gathered to witness the public execution of the monster. I can't believe that time, isn't it? They would say, okay, we're going to execute somebody, and people will actually go and watch. A testament to the impact Anini had on the nation. For some, it was a moment of closure, an end to the fear that had gripped their lives for so long. The death of Lawrence Anini marked the end of an era. A brutal era, isn't it? His brutal legacy lives on. He had exposed the weaknesses in Nigeria's police force, and this story became a powerful reminder of the consequences of corruption and the need to reform the police service. After Anini's execution, the government vowed to clean up the police force, and several officers were dismissed or prosecuted for their roles in aiding other gangs. Normally, when we talk about stories like this, the spotlight is on Lawrence Anini, the monster, but countless lives were affected by his actions. The phrase Anini syndrome became a term among the public, referring to instances where criminals are protected or aided by corrupt officials. For years after his death, this phrase was used to describe not only criminals who seemed untouchable, but also the frustration of Nigerian citizens who believed that justice was often out of reach for ordinary people. Thank you for joining us. We try to do this every week and improve as we go, but please join us. Leave your comments below. What do you think of the story and any other stories you want us to cover? If you found this episode interesting, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into true crime stories from Africa and around the world. The world is too big to just talk about Africa, but our focus would be Africa. Until the next time, my name is Yao Bantu. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember that every story, no matter how dark, can teach us something valuable. Peace.